Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian show on POD TV. We are going to discuss also the other topics like Russia, China, United States, Iran, what's all every topic which is very important today. I would like to introduce our man in Kiev, Ivan Kucheryanko. Welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Hello, Sasha. Hello to everyone. I'm glad to be here today.
Excellent. So, listen, I was under impression that there is some kind of equilibrium on between Russia and Ukraine, and there is some kind of a quiet period of Russians are preparing probably summer attacks against Ukraine. Unfortunately, they are continuing their terrorist activities, like against civilian population of Ukraine. It's a war crime by all means, and it's even difficult to compare to anything because as much as I've studied history of wars, First, Second World Wars, there were hardly any attacks by any combatants against civilians. They were fighting armies against armies, but not civilians. But in this situation, Russia is breaking all the laws, and I think it's a sign of desperation because on the front lines. On front lines, actually, their situation is the worst in the last 4.5 years. It's never been as bad as it is now. Because Ukrainians, they found some kind of algorithm of today's 21st century war, where they are just concentrating on Russian communication lines as their depot of different ammunitions, and never mind the oil refineries, and that hurts Russia tremendously, because in this situation, actually, Russia's size is playing against it. Because the country as large as Russia, it's impossible to defend all important objects. Okay, you may try it around Moscow, but even that doesn't work very well, Ivan, does it?
Yeah, I agree. And the current Russian advance on the front lines slowed down, and the last month they lost more territories than they were able to occupy, and that's why they are going to another strategy, which in which they are more successful. It's terroristic attacks or peaceful Ukrainian cities. Last night was a major attack against Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Kyiv. Almost 20 people were killed by Russian missiles, almost 100 injured, and I've got a short video from Kyiv about this attack, so we can watch it right now.
Yes.
And then continue our discussion.
Please.
Once again carrying out a massive attack on Kyiv. Behind me, a medical facility was damaged by debris from a downed Shahed drone. So far, there are no reports of injuries here. Hospitals and other civilian sites continue to be a target by Russia. This is an extremely large-scale attack. My colleagues are receiving reports from dozens of locations across the city, where civilian buildings have been damaged. Russia is using more than 70 cruise and ballistic missiles, and more than 600 of drones at the same time. Just a few minutes ago, right in front of me, Ukrainian air defense shot down a cruise missile. At least 10 people have been killed, and more than 90 have been injured. Ukraine needs additional air defense missiles, as they are the primary element of protection against ballistic missiles attack right now.
It was old data, because for now almost 20 people were killed. 13 of them were killed in Dnipro when a Russian missile struck the residential building, and a lot of people who didn't go to the bomb shelters they actually were buried under the remnants of that building. So we see that Putin don't want to stop this war. He continues to terrorize Ukrainian cities, and he's using the situation when Ukraine lack missiles for Patriot system to shoot down ballistic missiles, because major part of that number of missiles which Russia used during the last attack, like more than 20 missiles were actually ballistic missiles, and unfortunately Ukraine was not able to shoot most of them down. Only few ballistic missiles were shot down, and that's why the number of casualties is so pretty high.
Yeah, a very, very unfortunate situation. And I think that more and more American congressmen are turning their attention to Ukraine because obviously they're very unhappy the way Iranian situation is developing for the United States. In fact, from what I see, more and more it looks like Iran is dictating its terms to the United States. They are making statements that we are no longer interested to have negotiations. It's all done and over with. We don't trust Americans. Then before that, they were demanding, I'm not sure, either it's $12.5 or $25 billion just to get to the negotiating table. So they wanted to have that. And the funny thing is that United States have no problem to pay around $12.5 or $25 billion. It's not the money. It's how it will look. It will look that Americans lost the war and they're paying reparations. So one of the ideas for them was to have some kind of investment fund of $300 billion head by Trump's relatives and sons and all that stuff. But even that is not going anywhere, because who would provide $300 billion? The Arab countries in the region. But Arab countries are not going to do that, because what they're saying is that Americans, you cannot protect us. You cannot protect your own bases. You cannot protect us. So why would we would rather use $300 billion to deal directly with Iran, to pay them money for our tankers, for some other stuff, and normalize situation. $300 million or billion get lost. Sorry. That can go a long way to stabilize the situation, to make both sides happy, and go back to normal life. For Americans, it's not so much about going to normal life, because in the United States, there is no normal life as we know these days. But they cannot take a perception that they are actually losers in this war and must pay reparations. So they cannot pay directly to Iran. They cannot organize that $300 billion fund. They're running out of options, and frankly, today, I even don't know which way it will go. So a lot of congressmen understand that, and the upcoming midterm election. So they don't want to get stuck with a loser. They want to be winners. The winners is to help Ukraine to either finish the war on conditions which are acceptable for Ukraine, or continue the war. And the way I understand, there is very little separate Ukraine from actually winning this war, because the situation in Crimea is horrible. They just they have no gasoline there. They're just struggling, and Ukraine is able now to completely block all means of deliveries to gasoline, food, water, electricity, almost anything. So it's just a matter of time where Crimea will fold, and there will be no Russian defenders. Ivan, what have you heard about this situation?
Yeah, it's one of the major Ukrainian success that from one point, thanks to deep strike Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil refineries, Russia faced the shortage of gasoline. Russia faced the shortage of supplies for their internal market. It's not even about some Russian export of oil products, of gasoline. They've already limited it, but now it's about shortage on their internal market, and not only in Crimea. Different Russian regions face the shortage of gasoline. But as for Crimea, one of Russian goals when they've started full-scale invasion was to establish so-called land transport corridor from the Russian territory to Crimea, to supply it not via the Black Sea or Azov Sea, and not via that Crimean bridge they've built, but also by the land, using the railroad, using the regular roads. And now, thanks to advance of Ukrainian drone technologies and so-called middle strikes, Ukraine controls that land corridor via the occupied territories of Ukraine, like Mariupol, Melitopol, Berdyansk, towards Crimea. And during May, more than 100 vehicles were destroyed on this route. Most of them were tankers, actually, the vehicles which were used to transport gasoline to Crimea. After the successful Ukrainian strike over the Crimean bridge, Russia is not using it to supply gasoline to Crimea. Russia supplied Crimea with gasoline using that so-called land corridor. And now, because Ukraine controls that corridor with middle drone strikes, Crimeans faced the deep shortage of gasoline. They don't have it at all. And not only Crimeans, but Russian tourists who go to Crimea by cars, it's kind of a trap for them, because they just can go to Crimea, to the Black Sea. Then they see that on the beaches, on the Crimean beaches, there is no actual sand, but they're anti-tank anti-tank fortifications. There are landmines there. There is garbage, all that stuff. They say, "Oh, come on, we don't want to stay in Crimea. We want to come back." And they cannot come back because there is no gasoline in Crimea.
It's called a vacation from hell.
Yeah. One-way ticket for Russian tourists who travel to Crimea.
You know what I heard yesterday? That for all those tankers to bring up the oil, they need drivers. The drivers refused to drive there. Yeah. So Russia is now paying 200,000 rubles a month, and they still don't want to drive.
Not months. 200,000 rubles. It's like around $10,000. I say $5,000 or $7,000 per one trip to Crimea, not per month, per one trip to Crimea, just to bring that gasoline to Crimea. But it's actually a road of hell. It's one-way ticket, because if Russian driver is driving a tank vehicle, then it's official target for Ukrainian middle strike drones, and it will strike and it will burn that vehicle, because they're using that gasoline to fuel their military vehicles as well. So Ukraine is just destroying them. So yeah, it's
Russians
a
raise their offers. They have to offer 200,000 rubles per trip plus funeral expenses. How about that?
obviously, or like with the Russian soldiers, which they're recruiting for the war, they're offering millions of rubles just to sign the contract and go on the war, and either you or your family will receive those money in case you will be killed in this war. So I think that if the conditions will be the same for Russian truck drivers who need to get that gasoline to Crimea, then probably they will agree, okay, I will die, but my family will receive those millions of rubles as a reward for my unsuccessful mission. But I'm not sure it will help to Russia to increase the supplies for Crimea, because even one of the most important changes in the Russian war in Ukraine is that now the number of soldiers being killed per month is higher than Russia is able to recruit, because even when they're offering millions of rubles to those soldiers or their families in case they will be killed, the number of Russian people who just want to sign that contracts are decreasing, and that's one of the point why Ukrainian intelligence confirms that Russia is preparing another wave of mobilization just to recruit conscripts without paying them money, but takes them as conscripts. But this step is, according to the estimates of different experts, it's quite risky for Russia, because when they've announced limited mobilization last time in 2023, I think the huge amount of Russians just flew away from Russia, like several millions of Russians. So they've left Russia, they've moved to Georgia, to Europe,
Armenia,
to Kazakhstan. And it was a huge impact on Russian economy. It was decreased the ratings of Putin and his party, if those ratings mean anything in Russia. And so it was not a very popular step. And now they're preparing for another wave of so-called limited mobilization. Let's see. I'm not sure that it will help Russia because to advance on the front lines, because Ukrainian kill zone with a huge number of drones limits actually using of manpower. For one Russian soldier, now there are dozens of Ukrainian drones, like 30, 50 drones Ukraine has in our arsenal against Russian soldier. It's harder to find Russian soldier on the battlefield, to discover a target actually, than to kill him. Because when target is discovered, when Ukraine discovers Russian soldiers, then multiplied drones are flying over it, and he has no chances actually. And but the instruments which Ukraine used to discover targets on the battlefield, they're also evolving and increasing. There are numerous reconnaissance drones which are flying 24 hours per day over the front lines, which are monitoring everything. Ukraine is using actually a Palantir software to analyze different objects from the drone cameras, and discover which object looks like a Russian soldier and whether it can be destroyed by, identified as a target and destroyed by Ukrainian drones. There are drones with artificial intelligence which autonomously fly and discover and destroy targets in the specified area when Ukrainian soldiers just set the drones and say to artificial intelligence that in this direction there are enemies. Go there and kill everyone, every moving target which you see in that area. And then those drones armed with the artificial intelligence, they're destroying Russian soldiers as well. So if Russia will mobilize several more thousands of hundreds thousands of soldiers, it will not help them in this because Ukrainian kill zone will just make impossible and it will leverage the Russian advance in manpower. This is opinion of very lot military experts actually.
It will make company Palantir busier than usual if they will send so many Russian people on the front. This is a horrible development because actually, interestingly enough, a few days ago, I've heard congressional hearing about Pentagon asking for $500 billion. So it's absolutely exorbitant amount of money. And one congressman says, you are spending trillions of dollars? What, you want to build another, this huge avia carriers and all that stuff? Why don't you learn from Ukrainians what they would do with this money, $500 billion, how many drones they would already have? And you have to learn. You don't have respect for money. You're saying, give me this, give me that, or so on. So you think that American people will tolerate that for much longer? No, you have to learn how to use the money, what to do with the money. You feel that American people are obliged to throw, they don't have enough money to put food on the table, there is inflation and so on, and you have $500 billion. No, that's not the way it's going to work. So Ukrainians are doing fantastic things that for a fraction of the budget that is available to, or should be available, or could be available to American Pentagon, Ukrainians are doing absolutely incredible things. They're fighting the supposedly used to be second strongest army in the world. Now it's a third country in Europe, maybe not. So their future is so bleak. If Ukrainians would just get a little bit more defense available against this Russian terrorist attacks, that would be just spectacular success. And I think that's where we're moving. I think Europe is completely committed to help Ukraine. Not only that, Ukraine in any new configuration, because now their thinking is that US, they will stay in NATO, or maybe they will not stay. It's kind of, you cannot continue to depend on the US as it used to be before. So you have to create a new alliances, new configurations, and in any new configuration, Ukraine is taking enormously important place, which is very good for Ukraine and Ukrainian war production, and I think that's where we are moving now. So hopefully we'll see results of that. Very soon, the first Swedish-produced Gripen air fighters will be available before the end of the year. I think many more will be available, and more advanced will be available next year.
And it will also leverage another Russian advantage on the battlefield, guided bombs, which they're using to attack Ukrainian positions. Their planes are afraid of Ukrainian air defense systems, are afraid of Ukrainian F-16s, so they're launching those guided bombs like 100 kilometers away from the front line, and their range is like 100 kilometers to fly and bomb Ukrainian position, and that's actually the major way how Russia ruins all those Ukrainian cities. Mariupol, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, all other cities, they were mostly ruined by Russians by those guided bombs. But that Gripen fighter jets, which Sweden will give to Ukraine, they will be armed with air-to-air missiles, which range is 200 kilometers.
It's a missile.
And it will allow Ukrainian pilots to attack Russian fighter jets, and they will not be able to launch their guided bombs from that kind of distance, and they will be afraid flying closer to the front lines. Without such advantage, without Russian guided bombs, their advancing on the front lines will decrease even more. If now Russia is Russian speed is similar to speed of snail, actually, then it will be speed of I don't know what. Hopefully, they will lose even more occupied territories than.
Ivan, think about this. From a history of wars, whoever dominates the sky is in commanding position. So at the beginning of the war, Russians were dominating the skies, and Ukrainians didn't do very well at that time.
I don't agree with you, Sasha.
No?
Russians never dominated the Ukrainian sky because if Russians dominated the Ukrainian skies, then the whole city of Kiev was in ruins. All other Ukrainian cities were in ruins. That was a huge mistake of Russian propaganda when they've claimed during the first days of Russian full-scale invasion that they've destroyed all Ukrainian air defense. Actually, the same thing like American propaganda now says about air defense of Iran, which is not actually destroyed and is shooting down American drones and even American fighter jets and bombers. So Russians were not able to destroy Ukrainian air defense, both surface to air and air to air, like Ukrainian airplanes. Ukraine still is using old Soviet MiGs and Su airplanes, which Ukraine had during the first days of full-scale invasion, and that's why the Russia lost hundreds of their airplanes during the first days of full-scale invasion, and Russian pilots were then after that they were afraid flying towards Ukrainian skies, and now Russia is dominating not in Ukrainian sky because now they're using those guided bombs from occupied territories, from territory of Russia, but not from the Ukrainian sky because they're afraid flying to Ukrainian skies because they will be easy targets for Ukrainian air defense systems. And now Ukraine, thanks to the help of our Western partners, has more possibilities in air defense than we had during the first days of full-scale invasion. We've got Patriot missile systems, we've got NASAMS, we've got IRIS-T, we've got F-16s, we've got French Mirage aircrafts, and Russians are just afraid flying over Ukraine because it means that they, with a great percentage, with a great possibility, they will be shot down. And
pilots have to ask for more money to fly over Ukraine.
Yeah. But when Ukraine will get those Gripen fighters with these long-range air-to-air missiles, then Russians will be afraid of flying in the Russian sky, and Ukraine will dominate not only in Ukrainian sky, but it will also dominate in Russian sky, at least on the distance of 100 kilometer or 200 kilometers from the border with the.
Maybe they will try to dominate Romanian sky.
They already actually dominate in Romanian sky. They are just launching their drones in Romanian skies, and NATO is afraid of shooting drones down. And the last issue when drone fall on a residential apartment in Romania is a confirmation that Russia is dominating in the sky of NATO countries, because NATO countries do nothing to shoot down the Russian drones in their skies.
Yeah, because in the present form, NATO is a very, so to speak, quite helpless organization, because it used to be that United States were head and shoulder and would do anything possible. Now you can't rely on the United States anymore. So in fact, you're better. Okay, you don't want to dissolve NATO. That's another thing. So instead, Europeans are bringing up umbrella of new NATO, or you can call it any other name, organization where serious countries who want to resist Russia dominance in Europe. So there are more than enough countries who are willing to resist. It's UK, it's France, it's Germany, Poland, Baltic republics, Sweden, Finland, just name it. And France offered to provide a nuclear possibilities for all the countries which would be part of this organization. And the most important part of this new organization is Ukraine, because only Ukraine has a real experience fighting Russians, and they understand how to do it, and they have experience. So this will be a new, very capable organization in Europe, which will be able to resist Russians. If Russians will still continue to try to move forward, I really hope that Russian people and even people close to Putin, I think they understand already, if they don't, that it's a futile, incredible, stupid thing what they're doing right now. They continue to fight the war, which if it could have been war even in theory 4.5 years ago, there is not even theoretical any plan or any possibility to win war now when Ukraine is as strong as never before. Okay, I will thank you very much for today's program, and Slava Ukraini.
Slava.
Thank you so much, and hope to see you. Maybe you'll make it on Friday. Would be wonderful. In the meantime, thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.